person finds themselves lost somewhere, is it better to just stay put or just stay where you are?
Best thing you can do, the second you can't retrace your steps and you know you're lost, is to stay.
Have you ever gotten lost?
Not to the point I've needed to get rescued. Like go hunting for my own food at times, and sometimes when you're really focused on the animal, you lose track of where you've gone following it. I've got a great sense of direction out there. I always manage to get back to the car. When I see people on outdoor shows rejecting food, I'm like, man, you're just not hungry enough. Like you'll eat anything that moves there at some stages, you know?
What's the most weirdest thing you've eaten?
If a person finds themselves lost somewhere,
Yeah.
is it better to just stay put?
Well, that was
or
one of
to
my other
move?
questions.
Because I've always wondered, I'm like, people who go missing,
Yeah.
adults, kids, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I was like, should you start to move
Yeah.
or just stay where you are? And people are like, last one, okay, location, let's find them where they are.
Yeah, so the best thing you can do, the second you can't retrace your steps and you know you're lost, is to stay put.
Okay.
So people panic and they start moving, and then, you know, you've
The
got
search
someone
party starts-
trying to
yeah.
follow you around. And also you're in a panic state. So like I've heard of people dying after having crossed a main road, but they didn't even notice in their panic that they'd crossed a road.
Wow.
They tracked them across, and they'd crossed this highway like 2 times without realizing that they could have just followed the highway out. So so in that state, the best thing is to stay put, and knowing that it could be up to 24 hours, your best bet is to start to make shelter. So you can get through the night without a fire if you make a shelter that sort of just protects you from the weather. Like you're looking at, it's going to get cold at night, conserve your body heat, get off the ground a little bit, like put some stuff down. You can last that 24 hours quite easily. You don't need to be worried about food or water just yet. But shelter's going to be your priority, and then making yourself visible for rescuers.
Have you ever gotten lost?
No.
No?
It's an amateur mistake, come on.
Well, I mean, not accidentally, you know. I mean, not to the point I've needed to get rescued. I mean, anyone that wanders in the outdoors as much as me, especially because I do like go hunting for my own food at times, and sometimes when you're really focused on the animal, you lose track of where you've gone following it. But I've got a great sense of direction out there. I always manage to get back to the car.
It's like in this day and age, if you go like hunting or hiking, there's GPS now. The outdoor GPS, like it's like every time I go hunting with Dad, we have our GPS. Like it's very hard to get lost.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get lost.
But
I think the only way you could probably need help is if you like hurt yourself really bad while climbing a mountain or something. And
Yeah.
you just simply cannot move. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's thrill seekers out there that wander off without a GPS just for that challenge. I don't know. You would know better.
Well,
are there those psychos out
it's
there that do that?
technology too, you know, and technology fails. So,
Yeah.
you know, I've had people, the batteries have just suddenly died in
That's
their
true as well,
GPS,
yeah.
you know, they haven't had spares because they put fresh ones in before they went. And so that's the problem with us getting really reliant on that technology, is that it does fail at times. Like I'm so old school, I'll always have a map as well as a GPS, you know, and I'm always looking at landmarks so I can figure out a rough direction to go if I need to get out.
What's the most weirdest thing you've eaten?
Tadpole.
Tadpoles.
It's just gross, you know, like they're almost a frog, so they've got like little leg bones and stuff, and then they're not really, and they're sort of like very snotty in texture, and it's like
Like a whole bunch of them, or just like one?
I
Oh,
just-
yuck. I hate that gooey texture. I absolutely hate it.
yeah, I'm a texture
Oh,
person too. So
But was it like a whole bunch, like just a plate full just going hard?
it was a
What
couple.
do you think this is, man?
don't know.
A banquet or something?
tiny,
No,
though.
no, banquet,
They're
mate.
tiny.
was
You're
probably
eating to
about that
survive
big.
here, man.
We just like had caught a couple and boiled them up in the pot to eat, and it was like, but like, I mean, I have eaten a lot of grubs to survive, and I quite like the grubs because they're kind of nutty in texture.
Nutty.
There's a recipe book over here. Seriously, you're going to enjoy a recipe book here. Look, check this out. Grubs. Here's how to prepare grubs.
I
They
told
should
you.
have MasterChef. You should run a MasterChef session out of
Salt and
this.
pepper.
This is your staples. This is your pantry. This is what's under the bench.
Yeah.
Cook with this stuff.
Yeah, and
Jeez.
you know, that's the funny thing is like so witchetty grubs, people think are really gross. You know, you get these big grubs in Australia, but you can't get much fat in the outdoors. And
Yeah.
they're full of fat, and they taste kind of like egg when you cook them. And they've got the same texture as scrambled eggs, you know, and there's not a lot that's like amazingly delicious that's wild food. You know, I mean, I'm all for just if you can kill a mammal, kill it and eat it, because mammal meat's always going to be good. But although I ate an armadillo in Colombia recently, and the first couple of mouthfuls, it was this rain-cold male armadillo, and it stank. The first couple of mouthfuls were gross, but then we boiled it for a couple of days, and it tasted like beef. It was actually really delicious in the end. So
You have termites here.
yeah,
You can eat termites.
yeah, they're not my favorite, but when you're hungry, you're hungry. You know, like any win's a win. You eat enough of them, you don't feel like eating anymore. Like, not necessarily full, but they have a certain sort of, I think it's formic acid in them, and it just stops you feeling hungry because they're not that delicious. Some are okay, but most of them are amazing.
The way you've written some of the stuff over here is just, you make it seem so normal. I'll read a couple of lines. Page 253 for those who are interested. Worms can be eaten immediately and raw, but generally are quite gritty. Roasting on skewers can make them a little more palatable. Like, you make it sound sane. Like, this is ridiculous.
I'm trying to help you out here.
Gonna sell them somehow.
Oh.
Get your worms.
And he's a nice little insect curry or something. Look at that.
Thing is, you know, when I see people on outdoor shows rejecting food, I'm like, man, you're just not hungry enough. Like, you'll eat anything that moves there at some stages, you know. Grasshoppers are quite nice. You know, you just, like, pull the guts out, cook them up over the fire, and they're sort of crunchy and crispy.
What's the nicest thing you've eaten
Oh, my gosh.
in the bush, out there?
When's this podcast coming out?
2 weeks.
Okay, I can't tell you the nicest thing I ate then. I'm going to have to go with that armadillo then, like day 3. Unbelievable.
That's like a day 3 armadillo.
Day 3 armadillo.
What's day 1 best tasting?
Day 1 best tasting. You know, I've been really unlucky on most of my challenges. Not a lot of food sources. But no, I'd actually have to say those grubs that I found them in cacao nuts. So you know what cacao is?
Yeah.
It's like chocolate, right?
Yeah.
And so these grubs, even eating them raw, they just tasted a bit like hazelnuts. And they were so delicious, honestly. That's probably one of the nicest things I've had out there.
Would you eat it again?
Yeah, in a heartbeat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have a recipe for it?
Just put them on a skewer on the open fire. Works for most things.
This is something I raised with you earlier. Page 206, 207. You have the leaf box, which
Yes.
looks like a grave. But you mentioned about...
Show it on camera.
So you mentioned something about how this helps with calories or something.
Yeah, so every decision for me in a survival situation is calories in versus calories out. Like, if I'm going to run after an animal, I have to earn more calories getting that animal than it takes to, I need to eat more from that animal than it takes to hunt that animal.
Yeah, fair enough.
So climbing a big coconut tree for a coconut, it's a lot of exertion for not much gain. So you have to really weigh up all of these sort of things. And people build these gigantic shelters out there. You know, you see, especially on the TV show Alone, they're building palaces, and that takes a lot of energy for not much gain. You know, yes, it'll keep you warm, but the bigger a shelter is, the more air it has to heat anyway. So I like a little shelter. I usually try and find something that's pre-existing, like if a tree's fallen over or a hollowed log or something like that. So the less energy I burn to create a shelter, the better it is for me. And the leaf box is a more temporary kind of shelter, like if you're trying to move and survive. So you just sort of put some logs down as a box and fill it with leaves. It doesn't take much of my energy to do that, and yet I'll survive through the night because the leaves will keep the heat, you know, me off the ground, me out of the wind, out of the rain, and stop my warm air from going out into the environment as well. What people forget is your first shelter is your clothing. So quite often you can just grab some grass and stuff it down into your pants and top, and that creates like that puffer jacket effect as well. Keeps the hot air in. So the less I can burn to survive, the longer I'm going to survive.